What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's time for another Grottsmith's detachment. This time, we're getting creative with the Creations of Bile. This is an old detachment from way back in the day. This was available to players who play as a sub-faction in 8th and 9th edition. We're seeing a lot of mechanics return in this new detachment, so I'm excited to talk about it. As always with these Grottsmith's videos, I'm doing one every day of December, as long as we are getting new detachments and as long as you watch them. So please drop a like in the video, subscribe to the channel, all the YouTube things for the algorithm. And I will be live after this video goes live over on Twitch. Unfortunately, I won't be playing Grottsmith's stuff, but we might stick around there and play a couple of games if you're interested in hanging out and talking shop about the new updates to 40k that have occurred over the course of the week. So with that, let's dive in and talk about the Creations of Bile, this new Chaos Space Marine detachment. Now, the detachment ability for this new detachment is Experimental Augmentations. This provides an army-wide buff for your infantry models based on a table. This occurs at the start of the battle, so this is after you've deployed and determined who has the first turn. So unfortunately, you do have to deploy not knowing what your detachment ability is, but you have some control over what you get. You can either choose one effect from the chart or roll 2 dice randomly to determine 2 separate effects. If you roll a duplicate, they have no additional effect. However, if you have Fabius Bile, you can reroll any of those dice. So either reroll both of them if you hate them both, or reroll one of them if you get a duplicate or you don't like one of the results. So you do have a lot of control, and the benefits that you get are actually super strong. Again, these only affect your infantry models, and it also excludes damned models, so cultists and things won't get these. So essentially, we're trying to focus on Chaos Space Marine powered armored infantry in this detachment. The enhancements that are available to you are +1 attacks, +2 movement, +1 weapon skill characteristic to melee weapons, +1 toughness, +1 strength to melee weapons, and +1 ballistic skill to ranged weapons. Of these, they all kind of support a melee playstyle, and the enhancements and stratagems in the detachment also support that melee style. So we're probably focusing on the melee buffs for these units. We don't really want that ophthalmic enhancement to get that +1 ballistic skill. We're looking for +1 attacks, +2 move, for example. This reroll and duplicated effect basically means that Fabius Bile is kind of a lock in this detachment. Not really that much of a downside. Fabius Bile is great to begin with, so I don't think anybody's upset about having to take that guy, which, I mean, makes sense to me. It is his detachment. Now, with that, let's move over to some enhancements. Most of these are kind of whatever, partially because the targeting restrictions on them, or the equipping restrictions, are very narrow, and there aren't too many good places to take them. The first one is Surgical Precision. It can be put on any Heretic Astartes model, excluding damned models. It gives you precision. It's kind of nice, I guess. You can put this thing on stuff like Demon Princes to give them free epic challenges, and it might be nice if you're taking a duplicate Chaos Lord, because then again, you get Epic Challenge for free, but I think this is mostly a points filler. Living Carapace is Chaos Lord models only. You get +1 wound and a 5+ feel no pain. This would be great if you could put it on a sorcerer, because you could run the lone sorcerer who's just running around and doing actions and giving +1 AP to things, and him having additional wounds and a feel no pain helps against enemies trying to kill him, and also helps against when he perils his death hex. You can't do that, though. It's Chaos Lord only. Like I said, a lot of these are very restrictive, so they're not super useful. Helm of All-Seeing. You can put it on any infantry, excluding damned models. Again, it gives you a 12-inch denial bubble. It is expensive, 25 points. However, the effect is really good. A 12-inch anti-deep strike bubble is great. Although, as we just saw, a lot of the 3-inch deep strikes in the game have been nerfed, so less useful than it was, but still incredibly strong. The place I think that this is best is actually on a Warpsmith, because they can get lone operative by standing next to vehicles. So if you're in a position where you want to be protecting your backline, he's already probably untargetable, so your opponent can't kill him to try to open up the space to go drop their reserves. It's also probably not the end of the world if a Warpsmith just hangs back and like camps your home objective, for example. But I would love to see this on something like a Firebrand or a Traitor Enforcer, but obviously you can't put it on damaged models, so it is what it is. Last and certainly not least, this is probably the best one out of the bunch, but it is also dramatically the most most expensive, Prime Test Subject is equipable to any non-damned Heretic Astartes infantry. It gives you +1 damage in melee and also reroll hit rolls. This one's amazing. You can put it on a Chaos Lord. When he has his big go turn, you can get up to 4 damage on a Demon Hammer with hit rerolls, so you can get your sustained hits, your lethal hits more often. Just really good. Importantly, it doesn't affect his units. It only affects the bearer, but that's incredible. So now let's move on to some stratagems in the detachment. The first one is a pretty solid defensive stratagem, Monstrous Visages. You can use it in your opponent's shooting phase or any fight phase. When you're targeted by an attack, you get -1 to hit for 1 CP. Solid. It's not gonna change the math in a ton of situations, especially with Space Marines getting a bunch of rerolls everywhere. Oh my god. But it definitely is a pretty solid buff. The Masters Are Watching is a fight on death. 1 CP in the fight phase when you are targeted by an enemy melee attack on a Heretic Astartes infantry unit. There is a penalty if you are a damned unit, you get -1 to the roll to fight on death, but otherwise on a 4+, you fight when you're destroyed. This is solid. The detachment, like I said, is going to focus very heavily on melee attacks, so having this as a reactive ability is pretty good. You're not going to use it in every situation, but it's all right. Same goes for the next stratagem, Specimens for the Spider. This is used in the fight phase on a Heretic Astartes infantry that is about to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack that targets a character unit, you can reroll the wound roll. If you've destroyed any characters, you can then force battle shock checks on nearby enemies. The battle shock check part basically doesn't matter at all. Who cares about that? But we do care about full rerolls to wound against characters. This affects any character style unit, so if you're hitting things like a big Imperial Knight, you're also going to get wound rerolls, and a lot of big bricks that your opponent has will have characters in them, so you can get wound rerolls against them. It is unfortunate that the wound reroll stratagem is not more broadly applicable. If it was character, monster, or vehicle, for example, this would be amazing. However, it is good enough that you're going to get it in many situations, if not every single one. It is 2 CP as well, which is unfortunate. So this goes from being a really, really good stratagem, which is what it would be if it was just wound rerolls, to being a very narrow use case stratagem, but it's a good one to have in the toolbox. Reroll wounds against character units is solid. And the battle shock stuff is extra. Occasionally that can matter by flipping objectives or stopping other units from interrupting, but that's going to be very rare. The next one is another solid one. It is another 2 CP stratagem, however, Delayed Mutations. It's used in your command phase on a non-damned Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds and then gets an experimentation chosen from the list for the detachment ability until your next command phase. This is in addition to existing experimentations that you've already rolled. So if you need to, you can improve your attacks by 1, you can improve your threat range by improving your movement, for example. There's a lot of ways to use this. Unfortunately, I think 2 CP is probably too much for this stratagem, in my opinion, because it's also damaging you. But I don't think that's the end of the world. You basically could use it to shore up a bad roll when you don't get the mutations that you really wanted to for that particular matchup. Once per game or twice per game, you could be like, well, I can get the one I need to anyway. However, if you do kill yourself, Diabolic Regeneration can help you. It's usable in your command phase on a non-damned Heretic Astartes infantry and regenerates 1 model to the unit. If your unit is battle line, so like Legionaries, for example, you get D3 models back. The funny thing is the timing of these stratagems, because they're both used in your command phase. So you could potentially, if you have a ton of CP floating, Delayed Mutations, kill a model, then Diabolic Regeneration them back to extend your threat range by placing them at the front of your unit. You can remove a model from the back and put them in the front. It costs 3 CP to do that combo, so it's probably too many. But if you're also comboing that with like +2 movement, you can spike this super huge burst of threat range 4 or 5 inches up the table that your opponent maybe was not expecting, which is really cool if ridiculously expensive. If you have 4 CP, you can even combo that with the next one. Auto Stimulants gives you advance and charge. This is also the best timing for an advance and charge stratagem. Many of these affect you in the movement phase, which is really bad because then you have to pay your CP and you may not get the opportunity to charge because you shoot your target to death or they pull out of threat range or they reactive move or something happens. This is usable in the start of the charge phase, so you can advance up the table, see how the turn goes, and then pay your CP to advance and charge. Seems good. Given the fact that your army is probably going to be pretty high threat range anyway, with potentially +2 movement with regenerating models up the table, this is always an amazing tool to have in the toolbox. So I would say the stratagems in the detachment are fairly mediocre, but they do support the game plan really well. And to be fair, the detachment ability is really doing the heavy lifting here, because getting 2 statistical increases to everything in your army is huge. So now let's talk about a sample list build using creations of Bile. Now, I'm proxying today over in New Recruit with a Renegade Raiders list. We are going to be 10 points down here because we're taking Prime Test Subject on our Chaos Lord, which should be 10 points more expensive. There's no 35-point enhancement in New Recruit quite yet for Chaos Space Marines. So what are we taking? Only 2 characters in the list. I did have some Masters of Possession in here, but I think they are a little too expensive for a character that doesn't improve your offensive output at all. So we didn't end up taking those guys. We have Fabius Bile as the Warlord. Again, I think he's kind of a shoe-in. You basically automatically lock that guy in order to get all the buffs. We have a Chaos Lord. He's going to take Prime Test Subject for the damage and hit roll bonus. And then 2 units of Legionaries. The Chaos Lord can jump into the Legionnaires. So if you're targeting an enemy on an objective, they're getting reroll hit rolls and then also reroll wound rolls from the Legionaries themselves. So this dude goes absolutely ham, in addition to any of the other bonuses that you're getting from the detachment ability. So you could also have plus attacks, for example. You could be hitting on 2s. It's just super good. Also then have a little bit of a jump pack sub-theme. Because these are all Heretic Astartes infantry with a fairly high damage, oh, I don't want to say super high damage output, but a fairly long threat range, these guys get a big leg up from the detachment ability. So we are taking a unit of 10 chosen. I think we're going to drop Fabius Bile in there because he can give them a further statistical improvement. So we can be stacking additional offensive buffs on top of this unit passively. 2 units of Possessed, which are benefited by basically all of the random mutations that we roll from the chart at the start. Given the fact that they are reasonably resilient, I don't want to say Possessed are the hardest thing in the world to kill, but they have above average defensive stats, reasonably fast, and hit reasonably hard. Buffing any of those metrics makes them go crazy. So we have the potential to buff them along 2 different axes. So I think these guys are absolutely amazing in this detachment, not to mention the fact that they have their once per game devastating wounds, and if you can hit them into a character unit and then get wound rerolls, you can trigger a ton of those devastating wounds. So that's a combination in and of itself. So then we've also got a Warp Talon unit and 2 units of Raptors. Now the Warp Talons, again, this is a unit that anytime you roll an offensive buff, +1 weapon skill, +1 strength, probably +1 strength is good, and also +1 attack, that sends Warp Talons through the roof because it improves the chances that they kill their charge target on the charge and then get to use their Warp Strike to return into reserve. So we want to use these guys to basically sandpaper away our opponent's screens. Your opponent is very incentivized to try to block you and stop you from moving up the table because you have these bricks of Possessed and transports full of Chaos Space Marines that your opponent is trying to stop you from being able to deliver. The Warp Talons can kill them and then fly away and keep rapid ingressing and doing that over and over again. And the detachment abilities just make them much better at delivering themselves. We also have 2 units of Raptors, kind of the same deal there. Those guys are just going to be our utility. If you can roll up +2 movement, they move 14 inches, which is solid. And then any offensive buffs that you get out of the random roll at the start are going to buff these guys as well. So additional attacks, additional strength, all that's going to be great just to help them clear enemies off objectives and run around and do secondaries and all the normal utility unit stuff. Interestingly, I originally had Bikers in the list, and I realized that Bikers actually don't get affected by the detachment ability. It is literally only infantry. So we ended up swapping them for Raptors, which I think is pretty spicy. We have 2 units of Predator Destructors just to act as little gunboats here. Probably run las cannons and havoc launchers on those guys, kind of standard stuff. And then 2 Chaos Rhinos. Use 1 Chaos Rhino to embark the Chosen and Fabius Bile. That's exactly 12 models, so it exactly fits inside the Rhino's transport capacity. And then we also have 2 Legionary units for the other Rhino. One of them is going to attach with the Chaos Lord. And then the Rhinos can also just like hang around after they disembark their troops and act as utility as well. I don't think we're really breaking the whole game here in terms of our list composition. A lot of this stuff is kind of standard Chaos Space Marine fare. But I do think that these jump pack units and these big bricks of like reasonably fast units get special buffs from Creations of Bile that other similar unit archetypes in the faction don't necessarily get the advantage of. So with that, that's everything I have to say about Creations of Bile, the new detachment from Chaos Space Marines. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about my list and what you think about this detachment, and if you're excited to play some Chaos Space Marines in this new season. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports Tactical Tortoise, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.